Hello, my friends. Welcome, welcome. Get John on here in a second. Got a lot of good questions this week. A lot of similar questions across a couple of topics, so I'll be able to hit a bunch of things at once. As always, check out the Discord. We got the show notes on LiveWithMattRad.com, which Bradley, Slow Hand Sound on here, is always great about putting those together quickly. They're usually up on the website within a day or so. So if you don't catch the live or you miss some of it, you can go either check it out here or go check it out on YouTube, and then follow along on the show notes, which has links and descriptions if we're mentioning products or plugins or techniques or anything. There's usually links. How's everybody doing? What's up? How you doing, man?
Good. I just ate 2 quiches really fast. And I ran to the mirror to make sure there's nothing in my teeth. So I was rushing.
My gold tooth still there? Okay, it's good.
You have a gold tooth?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah, it was real pirate shit, Apparently they last longer, so you might as well get it. They were like, "You don't want gold, do you?" And I was like, "I definitely want gold.
Definitely,
it lasts longer, and the shit looks dope."
Yeah. Also, we haven't talked about the fact that your pearl game is great, and we're both wearing pearls on Live with Matt Rad now.
I appreciate you, and right back at you, my friend. And these are, as I think I said on a previous one, these are my literally my grandmother's pearls.
So cool. Love that.
Family shit.
So cool.
So we ended last week with the potential of digging into a question. A few people followed up on it about when to be subtractive versus additive when using EQ. And I was thinking about this topic and how we tend to do a pretty good job at answering the question for a few different kind of roles and levels. And I want to think about that, especially as we talk about this, because I think, the short answer of subtractive and additive EQ, if you are a record maker of any kind, is it mostly doesn't matter, and there's no rules, and do whatever you want, especially in the sound design and production phase. Like, there's things I've added 20 dB of EQ and lopped off everything, and sometimes I'm doing one move and another, and you just get there however you can get there. And there's nothing wrong with doing extreme EQ stuff. The flip side of that is, which you can speak on more, is when you're in that finishing role, when you're really mixing stuff that has had all the production stuff done to it and committed to it, and you're going in and doing subtle things, or you're making decisions of like, okay, is the EQ going to go before the compressor or after the saturator or whatever, subtractive versus additive can make some important differences where in the chain, when you use it. And I know we've talked about this a little bit before, and I know that over time, as it has for me as well, but even for you, who's doing a more refined, narrow thing in record making, that it's even changed over time for you. Maybe you can talk about where you're at with it right now, how you've thought about it, and we can just kind of vibe on it.
Yeah. We should add one more distinction, the difference between stereo mixing and Atmos mixing. In Atmos mixing, I'm almost exclusively, not almost, I'll take that back. I'm majoritarily additive, which is very different to my mix approach in stereo. The thing you have to be mindful of with regards to all, like you're talking about, all levels and roles in the music, in the record making process, is that you want to understand how what you're doing is going to affect the next thing in the chain or the final outcome, right? So I liked what you brought up about saturation or compression or some sort of dynamic control. The way you EQ, whether subtractive or additive, is going to change the response of that unit. So you have to consider that. I like to limit a lot, so therefore there needs to be a lot of subtractive EQ pre and post limiting, depending on what I'm going for. But I might hollow out a sound and then kind of limit back that range into place, like pull the threshold in and bringing out more of the stuff I didn't take out, but that might be a 20 dB or 10 dB reduction somewhere, right? And then after that, maybe I need to bring some more life into it in the top end or something, right? So you're making these moves depending on what's before and after in the chain, what the sound needs, how much headroom you have in the final aspect of the mix. That's why I say Atmos is different, because Atmos has about 20 dB more headroom than every stereo mix based on regulations and where they want their output level, right? So I'm noticing that, well, if this song needs more bass, I can give it more bass in Atmos because there's that much more headroom. So I'm not afraid of giant boosts in low end because there's simply space for it. When
is
you're
that
cramming
the LUFS standard is different, or the bit depth is different, or
yeah,
what?
no, the LWMR standard is different. They'll kick it back. DSPs will kick it back if it's above minus 18 dB. So you want to send it between minus 20 and minus 18 dB. It literally will get rejected by the DSP if it's minus 17.9. So they're actually standards, just like there is for TV and film world, right? This is not. Yeah. This is new to music making in records, but not necessarily in music making when it comes to film, right? So I love it. I could talk for a long time about why I love that, but that's more of an Atmos conversation and a headroom conversation than what we're talking about right now.
So let's stick to stereo mixes. You said something interesting, which is the main thing that I think about with subtractive versus additive. Oftentimes, when I was first learning from Eric Valentine, it was a lot of cut low end or tame low end before you hit a compressor or a limiter, because things like a vocal, having high passing a vocal before you go into a compressor, so that the plosives and things don't make the compressor, the saturator, the limiter, whatever, or the tape machine react too much. So take away offending frequencies that are likely to trigger your dynamic controls after. That's the main one that I've heard about.
Nowadays we have sidechain for that, right? So we could affect the signal coming in and not and decide where the threshold is for that to kick on, right? So for a vocal, for me, for example, on my limiter, my sidechain is set to 120 hertz. So I don't have to, if I get lazy and forget to filter, if I forget to filter, which I don't, I tend to filter about to 100 or so, 120, before any sort of dynamic control. If not, my start preset does that for me on my Faraday limiter. So you just set your sidechain.
So let me just break that down real quick, because that's a really important thing that it totally makes sense to me. I'd never really thought of that before, but the traditional thing was, okay, and mics have these switches as well. Yep. Lop off everything about below like 100 on your vocal, because nobody's singing that low. All you're getting is rumble and plosives and things like that. And so in addition to the sound of that, and it's funny to listen to some recordings and like 1 out of 50 famous recordings or hit records will have some weird low-end plosives, like they just didn't high pass. It's weird, but it just gets through. So I'm always doing that, but I didn't think about having a limiter, compressor, dynamics control, whatever, that has the sidechain, so the compressor or limiter just does not react at all to those sub frequencies as a standard thing. I guess that makes a lot of sense for all kinds of instruments. I mean, I get that with acoustic guitar a lot, where there's a lot of extra low thwack in it. And oftentimes when I try to, if I want to have that aggressive, compressed, like percussive acoustic guitar sound, I'm often trying to tame low end before it hits the compressor or limiter or saturator or whatever. And maybe I could just sidechain it, or add the sidechain so the compressor or limiter reacts only to
90+% of digital plugins at this point
have
compressors have that on it. I don't know any that I use that don't have it necessarily, right?
And you can probably, even if it doesn't have, like almost all of them have some sort of setting like that, but you can also just, with almost any compressor, just run a sidechain and run the signal. It's a little more complicated, but everybody should know how to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I would like to take a step back though and say that additive and subtractive EQing is the same thing, right? So let's take a more broad stroke perspective here. If you reduce something on the side, if you imagine a reduction, on the sides of that reduction are boosts, right? That's how phasing works. So if you're reducing 2K, you're getting more 3K. So your ears are hearing more 3K because of your reduction, right? So it's just an approach. To me, it's an approach, right? My approach is subtractive because a lot of producers are very additive in the way that they make records. These days, 9 out of 10 records are just aggressive in the mid-range or the low end or the high end. It's just aggressive somewhere or everywhere.
Well, it's also the philosophy of like, I can't hear that, make it louder. That's I mean, that's my instinct, producing, mixing, whatever, which isn't the way you should always be doing it. But just like, I can't hear that, turn it up.
Instinct,
it's a very human instinct. That's why people
if you're watching Netflix, you turn up the volume when you can't hear something. You can't say, like I could say when I'm on my Sonos, like surround sound, and the vocal's not coming through. Damn, I wish there was a bit more 2K in this. you know, like we're just going to turn up the volume though. Yeah. There's no EQ curve on this thing. But when you're a mixer or you're a producer or you're a sound designer, or you're a mastering engineer, you're any sort of record maker, you have control over these bands, right? That's what a band is on an EQ. So when I'm reducing one band, my brain and all of ours subconsciously hear the addition of the reduction elsewhere, right? So let's just start there. When you say more of which one, it doesn't really matter. If you're but if you're boosting more, if you're more additive, there's a higher chance of your loudness levels getting a bit more out of hand. This is anecdotal. I don't know, you know, I'm not sure there's scientific research on what I'm about to say right now. But if you are more subtractive and you're hearing things that are jumping out that are masking the good bits of instruments that you want to hear more of, and you reduce that, then you're balancing out your mix. You're actually leveling out your mix so there are less peaks, and the loudness will be more maintained and controlled, which is what DSPs want right now. That's what vinyl needed. We needed to be subtractive and low end because the needle would jump, right? We're mixing for different platforms, and we've talked about this on many early episodes as we started. This is kind of one of the bigger topics of Live with Matt Rad in the beginning was...
Yeah, say it again about streaming services.
We're mixing for a certain platform right now, media.
Format, yeah.
Right? Format. And we have to take that, as mixers, we have to take that seriously. As producers, we do too, but that's not necessarily your job to consider that the entire way through. The entirety of my job is how it's going to translate everywhere.
An important distinction, yeah.
Yeah. So that being said, I lean more subtractive when it comes to stereo mixing based on my lack of headroom. I can create more depth, a more 3D experience when things are a bit quieter, and I can subtract some harshness out of things. Like if you take upper mid-range out of if effects, and this is an example, and leave that upper mid-range in the dry signal, you are therefore going to set the effects back in space and let the dry signal of the lead vocal be more upfront. Another way to do that would be boosting upper mid-range in the lead vocal, but that's going to create harshness. Things that the DSPs will turn down, make our ears compress internally, causing us to have pain, and turn our car stereos down instead of up, right? Like there's a lot of moving parts here. So that reverb sitting back, you can also equate that to like any other aspect of a mix. If you want something to sit back, you take more of that presence out. Yeah. You filter up some of that bottom, that proximity, and you push it back, right? So that's subtractive for a reason. And the other way to do it is just turning it up. And turning it up is just going to make it louder, not create as much space, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, since I'm probably actively mixing about 25% of the time. And most of those mixes are things that I've produced, which is a whole nother, I feel like I should bring on a producer who mixes their own stuff, and then we'll just talk about how insane it makes us both the whole time. Because switching from one brain to the other is actually a very specific skill that's kind of hard to do. And it's interesting to hear you talk about this, because I think everybody's instinct, I'll talk about my experience, but I think this holds true for a lot of people, which is when you're creating and making things, as what we said a second ago, that if you don't hear something, your instinct is go, let me turn that up. Or I'm not hearing the vocal enough, let me turn up some mid-range, let me turn up this, that's not bright enough, let me turn up some high end. And what happens if you're producing and you're in the studio and you're just making stuff, that's okay, because you're not really concerned about headroom and how loud the mix is. But when you're in that mixing phase where you're going, how loud is this going to be? Where's my LUFS? How hard is this hitting? Where is it hitting the limiter? That sort of thing. If your instinct is to just boost and boost and boost, you're just going to destroy your headroom immediately. And I do that all the time. I'm working on a project right now that I'm now in more mixing mode of 3 songs that I've produced. And it's drove me sort of insane, because during the creation process, it's this like super aggressive, hyper pop, intense thing. So it's just like, let's jam it into distortion. Let's make it sound crazy. And now I got to make it sound like it's going to sit on a streaming service. And so I have to like put that brain aside and go, okay, things are a little messy in here. Instead of boosting the vocal, let me carve out something for the let me carve out the mid-range so the vocal speaks in that 8 to 1K. The hi-hats are a little bit too bright. Let me lower them so the vocal can sit above it, or vice versa. Let me switch so you really have to, when you're talking about loudness, it becomes really important to turn off the instinct that we all have both when starting out and in creation mode, which is boost things, and start thinking about carving and cutting and that sort of thing, so you're not messing up your headroom. It's really.
Well, I have a couple of thoughts on that, because I used to mix everything I produce as well until I doubled down on mixing, and I don't know if I put this into practice. I just thought of it later after I kind of quit producing, like what I would do in this case. Like if I were to ask what you do, I have thoughts on what I would do. I would do the production. When everyone thinks that the production is done, I would commit stems as if I was sending it to Serban to mix. Like if I was producing, maybe I think Serban's the right fit for my record. So I'm going to get it ready for him. Oh, we don't have any time. There's no budget. Guess I'm mixing it today. So therefore, I'm going to make a clean new session in Pro Tools. Like I used to produce in Ableton, so then, and Pro Tools combination, but say I was in Ableton, I would export those stems and then make a clean session with no plugins as if I would send it to someone else. And then I would take a week, if possible, away from that. Now I am not producing. Then the first thing I would do would be lower everything by 6 dB. I would clip gain everything. So all my clips would read -6 dB. And then maybe I would put a limiter or a clipper on that's making up 2 of those, right? And then in maybe 4, depending on what I'm actually going for aggression-wise, what kind of record it is. And then I would put my rough mix, the last production mix that everyone agreed on that sounded tight, and then I would mix from there, A being against my own mix as the rough mix from a week ago. Now, because when I hear people say they're mixing their own productions, have they stepped back from it as the producer, and then now have they turned on MixBrain? Have you meditated even in a 20-minute session before? Have you changed tasks? Have you understood that you're moving into another task and then really, really stepped into that role? And I think that's possible. I think you, of all people, I know you can do it, right? So me talking to you.
You can tell with the smile on my face that I have not done this, and I'm about to do this for this project, because this is exactly.
If you can,
say if you can,
a week, at least one day. Step away from it. Don't do anything to it. If you have an assistant, get them to prep it. If you don't have one, do it. Prep it the day before. Like, just step away. All the plugins. You can't access it. I remember when I was working on a project with Andrew Wells, great producer, love Andrew. He told me the minute that he sends a record off to mix, that rough mix, like that's on another hard drive. He doesn't go back. He listens to the mix as if it's this is the version. And he gives notes based on that. He's not A-Bing with his rough the entire time. He knows what the new mix is lacking next to his rough that he just spent weeks
really
on. You know what I mean? Like, that's a new thing. That's how I am with masters. When I send to Dale to master, it's 1 out of 50. I pull my mix up next to it because something's not quite right and I can't really articulate it. It's a new thing now. It has moved down the line, moved down the chain of command. And if you're doing 2 out of the 3 roles or all 3 of the roles, you can also do that. But you need time, space, and some mindfulness to separate those roles.
Yeah, and it's great advice. And of course, it's not always possible to do all of that. But if you can, definitely do it. And the only hiccup in I'm just selfishly talking about my current project, is that we're also, as I'm like doing the mixes, I'm also getting some production notes. Sure. So like, hey,
that's okay. You open up that production session. And then you bring that stem back in.
You're saying take the time, spend the time, and don't take shortcuts? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what we always say. Do we have any other advice, actually? We've done like 90 episodes. Have we said anything else but there is no shortcut?
Everything is a version of that. Like, if you want to be the best, just take the time. That's just what it takes.
Okay, when I'm mixing for a producer and there are changes in the production, the way that we stay on track always is when the producer sends back a new stem with the fix from the start of the session every time, as if it was the first time they sent the stem,
replacing whatever stem Yeah, you just V2 or
something.
There's no
confusion. So if you have to do that production note on your own, then you would then go back to the mix session after you assess the production as if you're the producer. And I would argue then you can probably just jump back to the mix session. You don't have to take another week, before going back to that. But if you had the time, I think a week off, 3 days minimum before going into that second space. And then I would say never master your own shit. That's not real.
Yeah, I don't
understand that. Just don't do it.
I'm still going to link up with Dale. We got to go to the gym sometime and bro out, but then I'm going to have him on and we're going to talk about.
I was thinking about that too. I want to come train with you one morning.
Okay, let's do it.
I want to see if you make me puke.
I'm back to it. I will not make you puke, but I am going to go. What are you doing this afternoon? You want to come sprint the hill with me? I'm going to do my first one in 2 months. You're not mixing.
No, I got calls to maybe. What hill?
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
I just did. Oh no, I can't. My back hurts too bad. I did. Okay. I did a bunch of chores and I played tennis yesterday all day for 8 hours, and I was climbing up and down a ladder. And then I played tennis this morning, and I'm in a lot of pain. And I'm not thinking about my pain because I'm having a great time talking to you. But
okay, good, yeah.
Bad idea.
No exercise.
Pain to the point I have to go back to physical therapy. And I'm going to call. That's one of the calls I'm making after this. Right. Thank you for reminding me.
Get some good rest. I'm sorry you're not feeling well.
It's okay.
There were a couple of questions. Well, first of all, thank you. I'm actually going to try to implement this for this project that I'm working on. I just sent roughs, the latest round of roughs off to, which included lots of production changes, to the label. Everybody seems very excited. I'm going to get some thoughts, but I think I'm going to try to go into mix mode now. And somebody asked, there's a few questions in the chat, and there were a few questions over the last week, I think either on the YouTube or something else, people asking about printing things. At least for printing, for mixing, somebody asked, why would you print your Pro Tools session so it was just stems? Because psychologically that makes a big difference. So you're going into the mode that Jon is in, that Tizio's in, that Baines is in, that a lot of the contemporary pop, hip hop mixers are in, which is they get stems with the printed production stuff to work off of that audio rather than sessions with plugins and all of that, so that you start from that place and psychologically everything's there and then you mix. We could probably go deeper into why that's important psychologically, but it makes sense that it limits your ability to do things and you're focusing just on refining and finishing.
Well, it's really simple because if I see a plugin and I think, oh, I would do that differently, and then I do it differently and the whole track falls apart, then the identity and the baked in vibe that was on that sound is gone because I thought that your attack on your compression was too fast. Yeah. I don't want to know what you did that I don't like because that's not going to make it better. Me changing the attack speed on your compression is not going to make that track sound better. It might make it sound more like my taste, but is that what you actually want all the time? Maybe, most likely not. I would argue no.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I'm a geek, man. I just change stuff, right? I change stuff because I want to, because I think I know better. It's like, I don't know better. I don't know better. It's your record.
And there's been some discussion with a few people I've talked to and a few people on Discord and a few people in DMs about, well, why wouldn't you just zero out everything and just
no,
let it? It's just not the way records are.
Losing battle.
Yeah, it doesn't achieve what people want, and the role of mixing has changed, and people can talk about the pros or cons of that. But the idea that you're going to send two top snare mics, a bottom snare mic, 3 room mics, a couple of overheads, a mono kick, a beater side, individual toms, and just send it to the mixer and see what happens. It's just not the way records are made now. And again, we can have another conversation about that another time. But everything is for the most part at this level printed and sent.
I did over 300 mixes last year, and I think 6 of them I had that much control over the balance of the instruments, because there was one record that I worked on that I basically got everything sent to me, maybe 10, mono and with nothing on it, and was just asked to do my thing. And it was an artist that I loved working on. And I would do that for an artist I love working on. I wouldn't do that for just anybody because it's a losing battle again. You're going to, or it's going to take forever and we don't have time. So,
okay, quickly, somebody asked, what if the printed vocals that you get sound horrible?
Oh, well, that's every time. Just kidding, guys. No, if it's that bad, I'll ask for a raw, or there's usually a raw included just in case, and then I can start over. But very rarely the printed vocals sound horrible. I mean,
yeah. Usually when I'm sending, I'll send a dry vocal and affected vocal or something like that.
I work with a lot of producers that know what they're doing, right? So if I don't know what horrible means. That's not even a word I'd like to use.
Unusable for you. If you're like, this just isn't going to work. It has, I actually had this with an artist last week who's doing he's producing all his own stuff. He's an amazing artist, amazing producer. And he sent me stems, and I just brought him up here. He's printing them on the couch because I'm going to work on them this week, work on productions. And he sent me one, and the vocal, he has like crazy vocal effects on all this stuff. So crazy distortion, crazy high end boost, like just wild sounding. And like aesthetically and creatively, it's really dope. And I was like, this one's got a little too much brightness. And he's like, oh, I have a bit crusher on. I was like, give me with and without the bit crusher, because maybe that's the sound, but I also think I might tame it a little bit. And so, there's aesthetic choices that get made, and sometimes you want to get an unprocessed version or less processed version or something. Like, give me your tune and give me your compression, all that kind of stuff, but lay off the high end EQ. I can do it better in here or something like that.
Yes, that's what I was about to say. You can usually tell what is causing that excess that is unworkable, and then you can just ask the producer to send without that one parameter instead of getting a fully raw thing and recreating. It's very rare that that's going to work. Remember, the artist is living with this thing for so long. The artist's sister, brother, everyone's heard it this way, and you're just going to take off that 10 dB boost of top end.
Yeah,
it's probably going to affect the mix in a drastic way, and they're going to be really upset about it.
Well, we both, I'm sure you dealt with this. We won't name the project because we love the people who are involved, and the project's great. But you and I both worked on a project at one point. Although this might just give it away, but the attachment to the rough mixes was so intense, and I was even working on the production end where I ended up adding pretty subtle things. It got it to the finish line. It took it to 100, but I made a lot larger changes, and they were like, the artist is really attached to the roughs. It sounds too far away from the roughs. It sounds too far away. And I'm like, I don't know, you hired me to produce, but if you want me to do subtle things, I'll do whatever it takes and whatever you guys need and whatever you can't get. But sometimes things are, even before it gets to mixing, people get really attached to stuff. And when we get back to the demoitis conversation, it's like, if the artist has an emotional attachment to something, and then you as the mixer get dry stems and you just like do your thing on it, it's just you're not gonna get a good result.
No,
records aren't made that way anymore. It's not like there's one studio rough and then you go to the mixer.
Also, I'd like the opportunity, I'd like more of an opportunity to talk with the artist about this, right? And say, why are you so attached to this? What about it? And if an A&R or a manager is jumping in between because they're attached to the rough, I'm not quite sure that is relevant. I'm not quite sure their opinion is correct there, because what if you strike a chord with the artist that just hasn't really got what they were looking for? They're attached to the rough because it's the best that they have gotten. Yeah. But what if you actually broke it? What if you actually cracked the code?
That's the hope.
Figured it out, and they're not going to listen to it because they're attached to the rough. I don't understand why someone would put that in between the producer or the mixer and the artist.
No. Of course. And also the other thing.
No. You're right, though. This is a good example. This does happen, and I think it's wrong. I think that there's got to be a way to an ideal conversation would be this. Hey, it's a bit far from the rough, but I'm going to send it on and connect you guys because I think that there's something here, and maybe we can take it. Maybe there's a happy medium, but maybe this is the right thing. Let's just get some opinions on it. Because then that other person, the artist or the producer, has the opportunity to say something along the lines of, oh, like, I really respect what you brought to the table here. I didn't hear the record like this, honestly, but this is a cool version of it. This is a cool direction. I don't necessarily think it's right for the record, but maybe there's what's so funny.
You're just talking like no artist I've ever heard. I wish they all talked like this. I wish it was all like
no.
Direct.
That's what I'm talking about. There is a best case scenario always.
Totally,
right?
I'm with you.
And I have had this conversation with artists and producers.
Yeah,
the best.
I would love it.
Yeah, sorry, I got lost your laughter. I don't find it funny. I don't think that's funny. I think this is like how records were made, right? Like, why is there 82 mixes of Billie Jean? Because they tried shit in the room and then it didn't work and they went back, right? Nobody said that mix sucked. Don't ever try anything like that again. It was try. oh, well, we had it on mix 2. Okay, cool. But we're missing that opportunity to collaborate and try new ideas because everyone's either not in the room or resistant to new because they've just lived with something for so long.
Totally.
And we get back to this discussion a lot. Like, I just don't think that there should be bounces that regularly. I think you should be a bit more mindful of when you're bouncing records and where it's at, who gets the bounce, who's living with it, who they're sharing it with. Are they allowed to play it once, or are they going to pass it on to someone? And I think these are actual conversations to have. And I don't think it's a laughing matter.
Fair enough. Look, I mean,
I've had that conversation is what I'm saying. And it always winds up getting to a place where everyone's happy when that's the open dialogue of what it could be. Well, thanks for showing me this other way. I actually do like this. This happened yesterday or 2 days ago. Yeah. Hey, I know we pushed you to mix this loud and bright for this movie thing, but actually for our EP, the way it's actually going to be released for our project, I'm thinking more along the lines of like a warmer thing, thing you're more into anyway. Like, could we take another approach? And I took a completely dramatic, like way quieter, way more dynamic 3D approach to this thing, not even close to the last version, the way I actually wanted it to be heard. And the artist wrote back like, this is tight. I missed some of that obvious pop loudness and sheen that the super loud bright mix had. But like, let's just bring a little of that to this. This is way more 3D, way more what we were going for. Like, it just needs to feel a little bit louder like that other one. And that's probably an EQ thing. Like, sick. That just worked. Like, what I'm talking about just happened. And that's going to make the record better. It's a better sounding record this way. It feels better. It grooves harder.
I think from the perspective of if you're a record maker of any kind, as we always say, the more dialogue and communication, the better. And you always, and don't settle on this when you decide it. We've talked about this, but figure out what the communication style and configuration is for the project. If it's going to go through the manager to the artist, if you can go direct with the artist, if the artist is even really the decision maker, is it the head of the label? Is it the big producer who's really the person, and it doesn't mean you want to start disregarding other people because, this is the only person that matters. It's not that, but understanding the dynamics as best as possible is a really important thing because that's how you will have the best communication for, everybody getting what they want. Yeah. There was a question and I don't know, I just want to touch on it real quick because there have been a bunch of versions of it. There's some in the chat. There's been some on the Discord. There's some on the YouTube about when I had TZO and was talking about printing auto-tune as he tracked. And I think there's kind of this idea that you can go back and do everything. It kind of ties into what we were talking about with printing the stems before mixing if you're a producer, that there's this idea that, you can go back and tweak everything after the fact. And that is true, but if you leave everything to that and you're not committing to things, it becomes a slightly different creative process. And so when it's someone like Tizio and Chris Brown, who've probably done 1,500 songs together, they're tracking with the exact setting they want. It would be just the same as saying, here's the compressor setting we want. This is the EQ we want going in. We have it sounding exactly what we want. That's really old school engineering. Auto-tune just happens to be a new school tool, but actually committing the sound that you want. So then when it's sent around, it's exactly the sound you want. Tizio is obviously a successful, great mixer now, but he spent most of his time being a vocal tracking engineer. So he spent thousands and thousands of hours knowing, especially with a singular artist, this is what the sound is, how the tune is. And yes, they'll do lots of takes and maybe he'll go back, but he's not going to go back and manipulate the auto-tune settings. That's part of Chris's vocal sound. And maybe they'll change it for certain parts of certain songs, or certain songs will have less or more.
Yeah,
that's an engineering decision. Yeah, and that's an engineering decision that I actually love it when people commit to things when they're engineering, before they're going to mix, whatever. That kind of confidence changes workflow a bit.
It just sounds like
great
professionalism.
Well, that's the thing
if you leave everything uncommitted, then it never gets committed. It's never finished.
Yeah, commit to things. Commitment is important.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying. So I just want to answer that question because people are like, why would they do that? Then you can't go back. And it's true, you can't go back after.
Don't want to go back.
But you can't go I guess you'd re-sing the vocal, but you can't go change the vocal performance.
The
tune is part of the performance.
In general, you can't go back and change outcomes anyway, right? So Why? Because we think we can in creative fields because they're on digital mediums now. Why do we think we have to, or why are we afraid not to? In 90+% of our life, we can't go back to the outcome that happened and change it. So why this?
Yeah, and I think there's a risk involved, and that risk is usually worth it. Like, go make some mistakes. That's okay. Go have a record. You're like, I committed too much high end to that. And I was like, fine, that's what you did. It makes it sound different. It doesn't sound like the rest of
I have that on one of the Leon Bridges records that, like, I thought I killed the mix, and like it was the first one I did, and it kind of got me the other 6 songs that I did. So I thought I killed it, and then I hear it now, and man, that's too much. Was I mixing with my beanie on? Like, why is the high end so bright on this beautiful emotional vocal? And no one else thinks this about it. And I've asked friends about it. Like, no, it's fine. I'm like, no, it's too bright. Like, I would not have done that. And I don't know why I did it. And I don't think it happened in mastering. It must have been my fault.
Well, it worked out.
But it's out there and it's working. Exactly. And that's my point. Like, people like it. It's doing well. And that's cool. But I don't like that I did that. But what am I going to go back and change it and ask them to re-upload to the DSPs? I bet I could. Like, I bet
you probably could go full Kanye.
I can go back. I can totally do that. I'm not going to waste anybody's time, including my own, to do that.
Well, a lot of, I mean, you know, getting back to what is this thing that we're doing, what we're really doing is capturing moments, capturing an era for an artist, or a day for an artist, or one vocal take. I mean, a lot of this stuff is just capturing. It's not meant to be perfect. We talk a lot about trying to refine and quote unquote perfect things, but the reality is you're still just capturing a performance and capturing a moment. So committing to things is a big part of it. I love the people talking about 251s in the chat.
The more we can think of it that way, the more we can think about capturing moments from the start of the process to the end, the more concise and compelling a record is going to feel and sound. So I just wanted to double down on that. And that's a very important point. That's what we're here to do from start to finish. And if you're in the finishing side of things, like me and like Matt, sometimes you have to imagine. You have to be able to, I was talking about this at dinner last night. You have to be able to imagine what it was like in the writing room, where the artists and the producers and the other songwriters are in there and they captured a moment and they thought, damn, this is sick. And you think that you're going to now change this to make it better. And then they're going to love the fact that it's different from that captured moment. You have to be able to, as a mixer, as a mastering engineer, put yourself in that room. And there's not a lot of us that have been in the writing room. I'm lucky enough to have had a publishing deal and experienced this. Not a lot of mixers do that. Some recording engineers have been in the room as an engineer, and they understand it, and then they became mixers. But I think recording engineers understand this more than most mixing and mastering engineers. They think they have to do something. Versus I used to watch Tony, because he was in the room with Puffy and Biggie making those records, like programming drums on, because they didn't know how to sync tape machines, like and SMPTE time code and all that nonsense that we don't have to imagine right now. And he understands, and I've seen so many stems in mixes that have no processing on them because Timbaland made it sound tight already. Like, why do I have to change Timbaland's snare? I might need to glue the kit together, and I might need to ride that drum bus a bit and make it feel like something because it's a bit linear and this is the same shit throughout. But why am I changing his snap? You know what I mean? Like, why do we have to have a plugin on every sound? And I've adapted that. I've adopted that and adapted that to the way I work too, where most drums don't have plugins on them, but my drum bus of some sort will have processing on it overall. I don't necessarily want to change the sound of the snare. Like, why are we doing that? Why do I have to change the sound of a Juno 106 pad? It's a Juno 106 pad. We know what it sounds. We know what preset 27 sounds like. Everyone knows what that sounds like. What, I'm going to filter it down a little lower so it's a little less buzzy. Maybe I'll put a tape emulator or a tube emulator on it. Sure. Does that change the essence of the sound? Probably not. So do you have to do it? Right? So we have to be asking these questions to ourselves based on what it was like in the room when that spark was caught. Why are we changing the spark? We don't have to reignite it. It's been lit. It's on your desk for a reason.
It's lit.
Oh my God.
There were, I just had to, there were a couple of tiers of questions. There was a bunch of the same ones. I wanted to hit them. A number of people, for whatever reason, this week asked about how loud to deliver mixes to mastering. And I posted something this week, or maybe last week, of that 100 gex song that I love so much, Me, 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 which at the loudest part of the song hits minus 1.9. And I've totally forgotten his name, but he DM'd me, the guy who mastered it watches these, and he said that that he got it in and the rough was that loud. And I don't know if the pre-master was that loud, but when he mastered it, he made it a little bit lower, and the feedback was, no, we want it just as loud. Which is amazing to me. Minus 1.9 on a sort of rock-ish sounding song is an insane amount of level. And whatever one thinks about, there's no transients on it. It's all just like explosion in your face. But where are you at with sending to mastering? Do you try to get rough mixes to be roughly the level that they're going to be at with mastering, and then pull off a limiter before you send it? What's your...
No, I send with my final whatever loudness I'm getting, whatever it's coming from. It could be a clipper, it could be a limiter, it could be both.
Do you end up getting masters that are slightly louder, or do you get them roughly the same?
Roughly
volume?
The same, or a little bit louder, rarely quieter.
Certainly, I would imagine that. So you're actually putting you whatever clipping, limiting, whatever is that you send out for people to listen to is the same thing that you send to mastering. You don't take anything off?
Nope.
Interesting. My impression is, and I'm this way, that I'm usually getting another dB or 2 or 3 of level out of a limiter at the end of my mix bus, which I then take off before I send to mastering. Although I send them my rough mix to see the loudness that the artist and label have been listening to, and then have them try to get the level presumably better than.
But you're making those. Correct me if I'm wrong, but for me, for the last decade, I'm making all the mix decisions with this mix bus on. So
I'm not taking my whole mix bus off, but usually there's something at the end. Yeah.
But everything is affecting everything, right? So if you have 3 dB of gain on a limiter, first of all, every limiter is going to sound different for 3 dB of gain.
Totally.
So to have the mastering engineer remake exactly what you did, where he's going to get the exact release times, attack time, and control the transients the same way. So
but I don't want him to do that. I want him to make it better.
Yeah, but
I want to get more level.
But again, back to the the demoitis and rough mix in the room through to the mix. Like, what is better?
Well, how do we know? This will get to the conversation, which is what is the mastering engineer then doing if they're not getting a level? They're making a subtle EQ move, and that's it.
Overall vignetting vibe. How are we controlling
using
the
what,
top
though?
and bottom end? Using whatever they want. It could be hardware that just gives a vibe to it. Their converters have a sound to it if they're coming out of the box. Yeah, subtle EQ could be Pro Q3. I don't care what they're doing. I just want it to sound done. I'm not looking for it to sound better. I think my mix, on most mixes coming from great mixers, could come out. I'm sending as they are, especially for a single if it's on an album. I think the mastering engineer is giving us an overall stability from start to finish of a record, a cohesion. And on a single, I just want it to sound better. I don't care what they're doing to do it.
Yeah. So you wouldn't give them the option to, whatever you're doing with your transients, to pull back some of that and let them reshape it in a better way.
Again, I don't know what better is. We've all agreed that this is the mix, and the mastering engineer. I don't know what better is either. Yeah, you said you didn't know what better was. You just wanted to sound done or finished or better or whatever. Yeah, I just wanted to sound done. Sorry, I used the word better because it was in my head. I don't know what better means. I just wanted to sound done. And I know when a master sounds done compared to the mix. And that's what I was saying earlier about...
I think you and I, and this is something that this is why I want to hang with a mastering engineer before I bring someone on, because I don't want them to feel attacked. The role of mastering has changed so much over time to where if I'm delivering a mix with limiting at the certain level and then they're just kind of doing whatever, what are they doing? I mean, okay,
they're doing things.
But again,
they're doing things. The great mastering engineers,
the whole idea is to demystify all this stuff.
Ninjas.
So if you can't pinpoint what it is other than saying it's better, I don't know that I like that answer.
Yeah, but you can't pinpoint what I'm doing.
Totally can. You can tell all kinds of stuff. You're using, that's why we do this, harmonic saturation and making choices about headroom and trying to get the dynamic, like the disclosure talk stuff was way too compressed in the rough, and so you opened it up. There's definitely very specific.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you can't pinpoint that without me telling you that I did that. So
totally.
Why does the mastering engineer have to tell us what they did?
Because that's what we're doing here on these lives, is demystifying things.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure Dale can tell you what he does. I'm sure. I just don't want to speak on behalf because I don't ever really want to know. I think it's a fresh perspective. I think it's cohesion on an album. I think it's
you don't hear
small.
something and then want to know how you go. This is great. I'm not going to compare it to anything. I never. This is great. That seems strange to me. I would always ask.
I only ask when it's so dramatically better. With, again, like what we're talking about.
Why would you not ask? Why would you not want to know?
Because I just want to be on to the next mix. Like what? That's why like a producer should have a relationship with a mixer so they could just send it on and just know that it's going to be in good hands. Like why do they have to know what we're doing?
Because that's all we do here is ask about what we're doing and learn about it.
Well, that's what we do, and that's what we do amongst friends at dinner and at lunch.
It seems strange to me that if you send off a mix and you get it back and you go, this is better, you wouldn't then go, man, I would like to figure out how to do this in the future. Why,
no, it's not my job.
Why shouldn't it be? Why wouldn't you just have a finished thing?
Because I want the chain of command to exist still. I want the whole.
That's a weird thing to want, but I get it. If that's the way you feel.
But we want to put all our mastering engineer homies out of business and like not have a fresh ear and perspective.
No, but if you don't need somebody, why hire somebody?
I never said I don't need somebody.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's what I'm after. Is I'm curious.
But I don't need to know what that somebody's doing. I can tell when it's making my mix worse. Yeah. Very, very obviously.
It seems an out of character thing philosophically for you, but I get that that's the way things have been done. I mean, this is obviously
how so? Wait, let's talk about this.
To not understand a part of your process, especially the last part, that improves the thing that you do using the same tools that you have and are obsessed with professionally, to then not be curious about what exactly is happening seems very strange.
Yeah, I don't want to think about 0.25 dB reductions in low mids.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. Isn't that what you do all day? Or maybe it needs to be more than that?
Yeah. The fact that I'll reduce 4 to 10 dB in that range and there still needs to be 0.25 gone when it's overall glued together. Yeah. I don't want to think about that. I don't want to have little subtle EQs on my 2-track, on my print. I don't want to have a Pro Q with like 12 bands that are doing a bunch of things. I don't want to think about how that's affecting me later, right? So I'm doing that in the mix. I'm not doing it on a 2-track, right? I might have a cut
Why not?
somewhere. That tricks my brain out to see too many bands in one EQ.
Okay.
Philosophically speaking, I don't know why you think that it's out of character, because
Why wouldn't you want to know what's happening? Why wouldn't you want to know what somebody's doing to your mix, EQing it?
Oh, but I don't want to know what's But I don't want to know what's happening. Oh wow, this is actually really deep. I don't want to know what's happening most of the time with most people.
Right, because but this is your work that you're sending off. Why wouldn't you want to know?
It's the same thing, though. It's the same thing. Okay. It's not for me to have to understand. There's only so much time in the day. There's only so much focus that we can put on other people, right? So if we surround ourselves with, whether it's friends, intimate partners, and collaborators, with people that we can just rely on, we minimize our expectations of them, but we have enough baseline expectations that things will get done and they will be the way that we have expected them in the past to be almost every time. So why would we get rid of that person or those people in our lives? And why do we have to figure out what they're doing that makes it so that we feel that way about them?
Because that's what life is exploring this thing that we're interested in.
It's so interesting. I know.
I mean, I'm obviously, this may be just like a sort of emotional interests that differ for us, because I'm still obsessed with like writing lyrics one day and then figuring out what the radio plan is the next day and then producing and mixing and all that. I don't really have an interest in being a mastering engineer, but I also think it's really important to understand what every part of the process is. It interests my brain, at least.
I'm taking it a step back from work. Like I don't spend much time besides maybe like a meditation in the morning. If Sam's podcast does one, like thinking anything but positive about you as my friend, right? Like I don't wonder why you're my friend. I don't wonder why.
But we're not talking about friendships and emotional love. We're talking about a process that you've just spent hours on that you're professionally getting paid for.
But what I'm trying to explain is, to me, it's the same thing. I found a trusted source of mastering for about a decade now. And I rely on this. Like I want that in the chain. Why spend time wondering, asking questions of what he did so that this person is not going to be there
because
anymore?
It's 90 seconds of your day for him to go, I added a half a dB at this, and then I did this and this. You could read it and know it in 90 seconds. It's not a big time suck.
And I'm sure I've done that from time to time. Like I said, if something's dramatically different and better, then I'm like, whoa, what? Or every year we start off with a coffee. This is real life. This just happened.
I love this, by the way.
Hey,
people are loving this shit.
I'm doing something different on my mix bus. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Where are you affecting less or EQing less for me this year? Like what are you doing less this year for my mixes? And he pointed out, oh, well, I've noticed kind of like that 1K area is a bit smoother. It's like, oh, well, I've been reducing a lot more there this year on certain elements of a mix. And I wanted to wait a whole year before I asked. And hey, how's it translating? Is this working? Do you feel like you have to boost there more? It's like, no, it's smoother there. Like, I don't. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Spider. That's what I was trying to. Less knowledge is less bias. Exactly.
We're not pro less knowledge here. Oh, that's a terrible argument. But keep going.
No. It's not a terrible argument because
that's terrible.
There's limits to our knowledge, right? There are experts, right? If you listen to all the listen to all the podcasts.
I like what you're saying. I'm not going to listen to all the podcasts, but I do like what you're saying.
I'm saying listen to all the podcasts that we listen to. I'm not saying the things that we listen to. When there's a scientist on, they're like, and they're the smartest person you've ever heard. They have 2 Nobel Prizes. They have all these things. They're like, that's not my expertise. And it's like the most adjacent thing.
I totally know what you're saying. And by the way, I love that you it sounds like you do ask these questions. You just do so many with him. It doesn't make sense for you to be asking every time what he's doing. And obviously you have a consistent thing.
Being honest, I don't care. I don't want to know what's happening in mastering.
That's the part that's weird to me. But
I'm specialized. I've chosen to specialize. You haven't. And that's interesting, right? That's something we just talked about before me going on this tangent here, is there's a reason why I decided to do that. And then I have trust in other people that do another thing that I bring onto my team, and I would call them my team, right? That to me is more valuable. The ability to say, this person has this. Oh, why don't we phone, it's like the phone a friend on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Like, I don't know this answer. I have this one call. I know this person's going to know the answer. This is a phenomenon that needs to be talked about a little bit more in this under-specialized world that we all live in different creative mediums. I'm not just saying in our world. That I think if people were more specialized and understood, not all of us can have success writing lyrics, playing keyboards, playing guitar, producing, arranging, mixing, mastering, right? You've happened to fall into that. I've had a couple of records that came out as a producer too, but the majority of my success is in one thing, and the majority of your success is in another. You just haven't fully wanted to do that personality-wise. So this is a choice. But I think that's the exception to the rule. I think people that are spread too thin, thinking they can understand everything, makes them decide to not be as good at one thing as they could at another thing.
Well, let me just say,
that's the argument, which is the less knowledge is less bias, is a great argument for that reason.
I think the difference is, compared to mixers from 20 years ago, you're doing something more akin to mastering than them. And I think the tools that mastering engineers are using are the same tools you're using to mix and refine and finish and sound design and all the names we use for it. so I think given that you're using essentially exactly the same tools, given some hardware differences and that sort of thing, the roles overlap in a way that are
it's not the same thing. They have less control.
The roles overlapped differently than they did 20 years ago, and they do have less control. And so and by the way, I'm not discounting mastering engineers. I think that having an outside ear has some value. It has a lot of value. I mean, it happens in every part of this process. It's just if they're using the same tools, why wouldn't you just want to know what they're doing? I think it just doesn't make any sense to me. But I think it's an interesting topic, and I'm excited to get with a mastering engineer and
I love
talk to them about
new things about new things. Right today, I'm learning about optogenetics. Right, like I read a whole book about optogenetics, the ability to light up certain neurons in the brain and decide to turn them on or agitate them more, turn them on or off, basically. With it's fucking crazy. I'm not going to go ask this professor because I don't have access to this man, and to learn everything about this. Right, there's a subject matter that's that I can on a fringe level like understand, and how it could affect us and how it could affect people with schizophrenia, for example, and super high level mental illness. Like, this is fascinating to me, but I am not going to attempt to be a neurosurgeon and change my career based on this, right? So that's an extreme example, and that's all. It's called. Hold on, I just listened to the interview with the guy, but I read the book like a month ago. I'm going to go look at it because my brain is not on what it's actually called.
Is there a chapter?
It's called Projections by Carl Diceroth.
Is there a chapter in the book on mastering? Because I want to read that.
No, my point is that.
I'm making a joke.
That's my point. On a smaller scale, on a micro scale, in my universe, why do I have to know what it means to be the best mastering engineer, to be the best mix engineer? Don't have to know. Therefore, I'm going to spend my time and my cognitive energy learning about neuroscience and health and maximization and how to be good at other things. So that's my argument, I guess is what I'm saying. I know what you mean, though. 90 seconds out of the day to ask a question. I don't know why I don't ask that question. I don't care. I don't want to know.
I'd at least be curious. Like, hey, you made my shit sound better. How did you do that? Because I want to make it sound better. But I get it. It's not that I'm part of it is to argue, to let people hear some arguments and think about it and that sort of thing. And certainly there will be more conversations about this. We have basically no time left, but I'm trying to see if there's anything else we can just grab really quick.
Damn. Someone just said that it was a crazy episode, so that's good.
It's good.
Call it.
Yeah. And okay, let's call it here. And let me just say also that it's great to disagree about things and explore those topics. That's what you should do with the people that you love. And I love you, John, and I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll talk about it more. It's great to disagree because mostly what we do is be like, yeah, that's great. And what about this? Isn't this great?
No, I want to mostly disagree from here on out. I'm just kidding. We probably won't disagree on too many things.
Feel better, man. Go get some rest, stretch it out, get the PT going, and then come to the gym with me.
Yeah, enjoy your hills today.
Thanks, man. And I will jump on the Discord a little bit after. I'm sure there's going to be lots of discussion. So yeah, thank you guys for checking it out. And, come on the Discord. Peace, guys.
Talk to you soon. Peace.